writing a new story, article, essay, love letter, or a blog post for your webpage. It's important we obey the laws that I mention. Every single time we need to pause in a sentence. Do the comma dance, 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 yo, the comma.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Grammar for Grammarians. I'm your host, Ryan Matthews. This is episode 2, Comma Rules. So as we start every episode of Grammar for Grammarians, we like to ask ourselves, what are we learning and why are we learning it? So the what. You are learning the exhaustive list of when and where to use a comma. You're learning this because you have been learning how to use commas since first grade. And as this is an 8th grade lesson, this is your capstone to your comma education. Why do you need to know this? Well, in order to write and effectively articulate your ideas, you need to learn how to use commas. And commas are one of the most overused but least understood punctuation marks. Everybody understands periods and question marks and exclamation points, but no one really understands how to use the comma. So in order to make sure that you are the best writer that you can be, we're going to learn when and where to use a comma. So again, our goal is to learn the 9 different times and instances you use commas and how to punctuate them correctly. And the goal is that we focus on the modeling and the rules now so that in class you can do more higher order things such as error analysis or even working on embedding this learning into your writing itself, and then also in your peer editing and revising, being able to notice in your partner's writing where the comma errors are. So, as it said before, you should have your graphic organizer out. I'm going to pull mine up. I'm going to fill out this graphic organizer. Since this is a demonstration, it is recommended that after each one, you pause and take your time to fill out your graphic organizer. And then if you're kind of unsure about it or you feel like you want more practice, check out one of our other videos where we focus on each individual comma rule or even attempt a practice thing that you may find online, just to give that extra repetitious practice if necessary. At the end of this presentation, you will be asked to go to the link for the comma rules post-assessment, which that information will be applying what you learned here, and then that will help the teacher, guide the teacher into what to focus on specifically in class. So obviously, if there's one of these rules that is a little more difficult, you're going to get extra practice in your class time, but some of these are going to be pretty self-explanatory, so they may not need to spend that class time to talk about them. So let's get started. The first rule is your adjective rule. Now, the adjective rule is whenever there are 2 or more adjectives before a noun, they should be separated by a comma. Now, the caveat with this is that they have to be able to be separated by the word and. So if the word and does not make sense in between the adjectives, then you cannot use it. So for example, John didn't like the mushy, lukewarm mashed potatoes his mom made for his birthday. If I were to rephrase that, John didn't like the mushy and lukewarm mashed potatoes his mom made for his birthday, that would make sense. So this necessitates a comma. You put the comma directly after the first adjective. So again, this is the adjective rule. You use a comma whenever there are 2 or more adjectives. The caveat is that the adjectives need to be able to be separated by the word and. If the word and does not make sense, do not use a comma. Go ahead and pause and check out and practice this comma rule. Okay, our next one is the appositive rule. Now, the key information to know about an appositive is that it is extra information that could be taken out of the sentence. So this is kind of like the parenthetical information. It's not necessary. It provides extra knowledge to the reader, but it could be taken out and the sentence completely makes sense. So when I look at our example, John, a local plumbing savant, was recently named Plumber of the Year by Plumbers Monthly. The extra information that I located is John, a local plumbing savant. Because if I were to take this out, John was recently named Plumber of the Year by Plumbers Monthly, still makes sense. So that information is our extra information. And the way you set it off is, so you put a comma before the first word, and then you put the second comma, so this is one that requires two, directly after the last word of that, a positive information. So go ahead and pause and check out the appositive rule. Okay, next is the city-state rule. This is one that you may be familiar with. This is one of the first ones that you learned. But this just means that, you put a comma after the city and then the state. This also works for a city in a country. So Ontario, Canada, you would put Ontario, comma, Canada. This also works. So the other thing to know too is that if this sentence were to continue, so for example, John resides in Topeka, Kansas during the winter, you would need to also put a comma after the state or country. So again, city-state, this is the basic one you've learned. It's just the comma is used to separate the city from the state. The next one, so go ahead and pause and practice the city-state comma rule. Okay, the next one, this is our coordinating conjunction rule. Now, coordinating conjunctions are used to combine two complete sentences. So neither part of this should be a fragment. They should be two complete sentences, meaning they could stand on their own. And what the coordinating conjunction does is it connects the two to make a complete thought. And there are 7 coordinating conjunctions that have the convenient acronym of fanboys. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. So these are the 7. There's not, an exhaustive list where, like, if I was going to name every adverb, it would go on for days. There are 7. And the way you punctuate the comma is as follows. So if I look at my sentence, John is enjoying the extra attention his award has brought, yet he yearns for a return to simpler times. So I see my fanboy right here, yet. Okay? You put your comma directly before the fanboy. So that comma indicates a pause, then the conjunction indicates that the next complete sentence is going to follow. And these have different connotations for when to use them, which is another lesson. But the point is that when you have two complete sentences connected by a fanboy, you need a comma before. Go ahead and practice the coordinating conjunction comma rule. Okay, the next one is our dependent clause. And the dependent clause is when you separate a fragment, which is at the beginning, from a complete sentence. So unlike the coordinating conjunction, a dependent clause, because it's dependent on the rest of the sentence to work, is a fragment plus a complete sentence. So it always starts with some sort of phrase like while, whenever, however. So there are definitely some dependent clause phrase starters, but basically you find the fragment, and we know it's a fragment because it wouldn't stand on its own, right? So if I look at my sentence, while he is known for his elaborate techniques, John has mastered the fundamentals of plumbing too. If I were to take away the complete sentence, while he is known for his elaborate techniques, right? We want to finish that sentence. So that's how we know it's a fragment. Fragments, there are some visual cues you can look for, but almost always when you read a fragment, you know that it's a fragment because you're left wanting for more. So the way you punctuate the dependent clause is you put the comma directly after the fragment. Go ahead and practice the dependent clause. Okay. Our next rule is the dialogue rule. And the dialogue rule, it means that you separate the speaker before the quote. And it comes right before the quotation mark. So when I look at our example, John replied, "You need to tighten that valve just a smidge more." I'm missing my quotation marks, first of all. And then you put your comma right before the quotation mark. So it separates speaker from what's being said. So you're kind of seeing the pattern that commas indicate a pause a lot of times, but they're also used to separate. Okay, our next one is the introductory. We'll go ahead and practice dialogue. I'll pause. Okay. Now, introductory word phrase. And these are single adverbs, a yes, a no, a direct address, like if you're saying, "John, you need to do this," or those transition words or phrases. In conclusion, however, in contrast, first, second, third, right? All those introductory phrases we use to begin a sentence. So they're not really a fragment. It's more of a word or a phrase that's used to begin something. You put the comma directly after it. So, yes, John did graduate from the Harvard School of Plumbing. Go ahead and practice the introductory word or phrase. Okay. Winding down. Again, and you should be pausing, following each one to make sure that you're getting the necessary practice. So, month, day, year. Again, this is another one you maybe have a lot of familiarity with or practice with, but basically you put the comma after the day. Again, like the city state, his birthday is April 25th, 1972. But like city state, if we were to continue the sentence, you would need to put a comma there. So go ahead and practice month, day, year. All right, our final comma rule. There are 9, and you have blazed through them to probably one of the also more common ones, and that is a series. So when you have 3 or more items in a row, you need to use commas to separate, because otherwise you would be saying "and" over and over and over, and that doesn't sound right. So John lists his hobbies as plumbing, laying pipe, and shredding pipe at his local skiing resort. So you make sure you put a comma after each item in the list. However long the list is, that's however many commas you need. So go ahead and pause to practice the series rule. Okay, so we have gone through the 9 rules, and it should be mostly reviewed because these are all comma rules that, as per the Common Core state standards, have been laid out prior to 8th grade. So hopefully this is a review. But if not, feel free to check out our individual videos for each of those comma rules if you feel like you need a little more practice. Or on the World Wide Web, you can find plenty of practice activities to do for these different comma rules. Once you feel pretty confident with these, you can use this resource that you've now created, and it is going to be part of your grammar notebook, to then complete the comma rules "What's the Rule" quiz. So it has 2 parts. The first part, you're going to apply by picking out the comma rule that was used, and then in part 2, you're going to rewrite to add the missing commas following those comma rules. So this will be a way to kind of assess based on the modeling that you saw here and then the extra practice that you reached out on your own to see basically where everybody is and to provide your teacher with that valuable information to then really calibrate the instruction to meet what the students need. So this was our 2nd episode of Grammar for Grammarians. Thank you for being such an excellent audience, and I look forward to seeing you next episode.